All right, welcome in to Big Hitters Only. We're recording on Tuesday, January 28th at 11:24 p.m. right after the Tar Heels fell to Pitt 73-65. UNC is now 13-9 overall, 6-4 in the conference. We have Spenser and Connor. Good to see you guys. Been a little bit. Good to see you guys. First of all, off the top here, new sponsor alert. We have a new sponsor, Delta Spirits, which is a Delta 9 THC infused drink. This is like the like a liquor replacement. So you use this in cocktails. This is the like drips you put into drinks.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to make them a little fun. And then I have 6-packs here. These are actually really good. Split one tonight with my girlfriend. I had a couple sips. So there's 4 different flavors: Pomona, cherry limeade. There's a ginger mule and a blueberry limeade. So you're gonna go to their website, drinkdeltaspirits.com/shop, and use a promo code BHO10. Producer Connor's gonna put that up on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, buy Delta Spirit. It's local. It's actually based in Kernersville, Connor.
My hometown.
And,
Shout out Kernersville.
Yeah, Connor, Kernersville and Greensboro. And use the promo code BHO10. We'll talk about that more later. All right, let's get to the game, guys. So while you're here, we're going to go about 20-25 minutes on UNC Pitt. We're going to bring on Isaac Trotter, national writer for CBS. I'm going to record that tomorrow morning early. He's going to talk Duke UNC, UNC Pitt, and UNC in general. All right, Spenser, we're talking off air. I thought it was a game where UNC didn't really want to win. They just didn't have the fire, the fight. Offense is kind of similar to what we've seen without Jaylen Washington. A lot of jacked up threes. Had a 10-point lead, almost going to half. Gave up an 8-0 run. They thought they had kind of control of the game, but they never extended the lead, and then Pitt took their largest lead at 4 late in the second half, and then kind of UNC gave up. Your initial thoughts, Spenser?
Like a lot of games that Carolina has played, almost every single one this season, a tale of two halves. Really good first half, outside of the final 2 minutes where, like you just mentioned, we gave 8 of a 10-point lead up. Again, good first half. Second half, just didn't have it. I mean, you can look at the shooting stats. You can look at the rebounding. Pitt did a much better job defending us. They did a much better job rebounding. They did a much better job forcing turnovers. And Carolina did not as good a job of the flip side of all of those things. So, really unfortunate that they couldn't keep that momentum going in the second half. I think we've seen this team, anytime they've played well in the first half, generally speaking, they've played pretty well in the second half. And we've seen bad first halves flip-flop into good second halves. But, I'll say I was feeling pretty good at halftime. Again, gave up a little bit of a lead, but I certainly was not feeling bad at all. And then we stretched the lead just a little bit to start the second half, and then quickly gave it away, and then it was just tit for tat there for a while. And like you said, Pitt took a lead with a few minutes to go and never gave it back. So, yeah, really unfortunate.
Yeah, tonight. I mean, frustrating loss, I think. UNC was 6 for 13 from 3 in the first half, 46%, and they only made 1 3 in the second half. I don't really know who was. I guess you give Elliot Carson kind of player of the game, but I didn't think he was that great. RJ was hit or miss. Connor, what were your initial thoughts as we dive into more particulars on this game?
Yeah, so Spenser, you said tale of two halves. How about tale of two Elliot Carsons? Because early on, he was attacking, got into the lane. He had 9.6 assists in the first half, attacking early, finishing over defenders, setting guys up for easy looks. That Drake Powell 3 in the corner was a great pass. And that's what you want from Elliot Carson, is that version of him.
Mm-hmm.
But you only get that, 30, 35% of the game, and not even every game. Because you saw in the second half, he was a non-factor, and primarily because of foul trouble. If you're Elliot Carson, the number one point you have to realize is how important you are to this team. Because from a pure passing standpoint, he's one of the best pure passers I've seen in Carolina Blue, in a long time. I haven't, been alive that long, but since maybe even Kendall Marshall, just from a pure passing standpoint. But it's just the silly fouls, the turnovers, and when he starts forcing it, he becomes a non-factor. And when you don't have a lot of guys on the team you can turn to, that's not a recipe for success. So if you're Elliot Cadeau, you got to get under control. And that was my number one takeaway was the highs were really high tonight. First half was great. And the second half, him not being a factor was one of the primary reasons they lost this game, I think.
Yeah, he had 6 assists in the first half and 1 in the second half.
He's on the bench.
I know. With some really bad fouls. Let's call a spade a spade. He turned the ball over a couple of times and then just grabbed the guy out of frustration. His fourth foul, reaching in, trying to strip the ball on that fast break. You got to know, playing with 3 fouls, you just can't do that.
And they're obvious fouls.
If you do, you've just really got to try to make it super glancing and not that aggressive of a play. And like he really just stuck his arm fully in there and stopped the guy's momentum. Just an easy whistle. You've just got to play. You've just got to play smarter than that. Plain and simple.
Yeah, he had 4 turnovers. I thought he forced a lot of things late. I thought that pass he forced in the under 3 mark to Vanal and Lubin. I think Lubin may have been credited for the turnover there because Lubin had 4 turnovers. That's way too many for someone who doesn't handle the ball at all. I thought Cadeau forced a lot of things at key moments. But yeah, it's like you said. Yeah, exactly, Connor. Like there's really good Elliot, and the offense is moving, and he's driving, attacking, and passing ahead. And there's bad Elliot with the fouls, and the turnovers and forcing things. Only 1 for 6 from 3. Also, I mean, one note, I was texting with some buddies. Seth Trimble, 3 for 14, and then Ian Jackson only 4 for 10. You definitely want Ian Jackson shooting more than Seth, I think. I think that was a good point one of my buddies made. But Seth was 0 for 5 from 3. Not his best game. Led the team in rebounding with 12. I think Elliot's I think he's becoming a very divisive kind of player among UNC fans. I think a lot of people think he's bad for the team. Same with RJ now, too, almost. It's like I see some threads where they think the team would run better without RJ playing. So it's just been
what's the alternative?
Yeah, I guess just give more minutes to Drake and Ian. But I've just seen that a lot where like it's such ball dominant guards that hurt the team. It's just this is a very frustrating team, and they're in all these games, and it makes it intriguing and fun to watch. But it could get bad here pretty quickly.
So I think coming into this game, it was 9 one-possession games they've been in so far this year out of 22 games, and they went 5-4 in those one-possession games. But this is not the Carolina basketball we're used to seeing. A dogfight with Pitt, a dogfight with Stanford, with California was their only really good win so far this calendar year. It's like, that's not what we're used to seeing. But as a UNC fan, and me specifically, I feel like I've been spoiled. I'm not used to this. This is brand new for me. I don't want to struggle against Wake Forest on a Tuesday night. I don't know.
Yeah.
Connor, how old were you in like 08, 09?
9 years old. So that was my first, that was the team I fell in love with, was the 09 championship team.
Yeah, those were spoiled teams. Those are the Hansbrough, Ty Lawson, Wayne Ellington teams.
Dude, every lunch argument, I was just running the table at these lunch table arguments. It's like, you see Carolina last night, we're 33-4, and then
on that note,
I was talking with a new friend over the weekend. This guy that I met, he went to Carolina. We never knew each other, and we were just talking shop the whole this whole time that we were hanging out, and we were talking about that 2012 team, like same thing, like so many good players. And they used to just beat the pants off of teams.
I'll never forgive Creighton. I'll never forgive Creighton. Dirty ass team.
It's just not the case. I mean, we haven't had a team in the Hubert Davis era, and if you really want to dip a little further back, since like 2019, Roy Williams' final like really good team, that 1 seed that lost to Auburn. We just haven't had one of those teams that goes and blows another team out. I mean, like, here's like speaking from personal experience. As a senior walk-on, I played in 18 games. 18 in one season. That, again, I got in a couple of postseason games, but still, like, I played in 18 games. Our walk-ons have played in like 2 or something like that.
Yeah,
we just don't beat teams like we used to.
It's just so far, like when we're like we're a bubble team, and I'm not not used to that. It's not not Carolina basketball. The argument should be like, is this a championship team or like a Final Four team? Like that's what the standard is, and so they're underperforming to the standard. Like, yeah, every game we don't know what's going to happen. I think it kind of plays to the instability and inconsistency with this team. You don't really know what you're going to get, if you're going to get good Elliot, bad Elliot, if RJ's going to go off and hit 3 threes or kind of disappear for a whole half. Yeah, I mean, Ian Jackson has had the best games the last couple runs. What do you have today? Just 9 points. I think he scored in single digits the last 3 games. So there's a lot of inconsistencies and unknowns, which is leading to these contests where it's going to be. I mean, you just knew this game was going to go late. UNC never separated. After that 10-point lead, they never got it anywhere close to double digits. It was always kind of 4 points, 6 points, back to 4, 2 points.
Yeah.
And then Pitt took the lead, hit some shots late, and UNC could not score late. Didn't get anything cooking late out of 2 or 3 timeouts. Nothing. It was blocked shots at the rim or a turnover or missed threes.
Yeah. Well, these games against Pitt, even going back to the Jamie Dixon years, like 6, 8, 10 years ago, like these games against Pitt always seem to be a dogfight. Even if you end up winning by 10 or 12, 14 points, like they always seem to be really, really hard fought games. And especially in the Jeff Capel era, he went to Duke. They hate us, and understandably. And a couple of years ago, his brother Jason, who played at Carolina, got disrespected. I can't remember the exact story on it. I tried to find it earlier, but I just can't remember. Like, he got disrespected. So there's just like a lot of dynamics going on between this particular like coaching staff at Pitt and North Carolina. And so you just you're going to get a hard fought game. That's always been the way that Pitt has played basketball. And so, I came in expecting that tonight, and again, had a good first half, but expecting them to come back. And in the second half, and I've got a thought here. I've just been looking at the stats since we've been chatting. And one of the things about this second half tonight is that I feel like we dwindled. And Ross, what you said, we just couldn't get anything going in those final 6, 8, 10 minutes, something like that. Like, the rotation was tight tonight. I mean, we had on the game, you had 3 minutes from Withers, 1 minute from James, and 4 minutes from Ty Claude. And then 24 minutes from Drake Powell. Everybody else, starting 5, I guess that would be, played 28 or more minutes. RJ played 39. Seth played 36. So we had not a lot of guys playing a lot of minutes. And in a road game that is neck and neck, playing that tight of a rotation, guys are going to get tired. Like you saw it, like we still tried to push the pace. There were a lot of kick aheads in the second half. And one of the things that Pitt did really well in the second half that they didn't do as well in the first was stop Carolina from scoring in transition. They did a great job of just finding whoever that ball was being kicked ahead to, because, again, I remember a ton of times Cadeau was kicking it ahead, RJ was kicking it ahead. We were trying to find guys in transition, and Pitt, credit to them, did a really good job of slowing that transition game down. But, again, I think the lack of bench contribution hurt Carolina tonight. And, we missed Jaylen Washington. Again, we've built him up and we've torn him down a little bit this year. But he plays a lot of minutes. He gets rebounds. He clogs up the lane here and there. He's another body. I mean, golly, Ben Allen Lubin played 32 minutes. There's no doubt in my mind that's the most he's played by a lot this year.
Yeah, well, Jalen Withers did not play in the second half, and neither did James Brown. And I'll let you get in here, Connor. But I think Jaylen Washington, I think he's much better at catching the ball than Van Allen Lubin. I know it's a simple piece of analysis, but Lubin definitely misses 2 or 3 passes a game. And maybe they're a little tough passes from Cadeau or Davis, but he has an issue catching the ball. And I think Jaylen Washington's been great the last 2 or 3 games. He had one
Yes,
of
he
his best
has.
games, I think, last game. So he has been better, despite kind of also being a little frustrating.
Yeah.
Connor, what you
And
got?
Pitt,
Oh,
I'd have to look at the. Sorry, guys. I'd
You're
have
good.
to look at the roster, but I don't think Pitt had this huge height advantage down low. And maybe they were a little taller across the board, but not some
It's more
huge height
athletic. It
advantage.
was
Yeah,
athleticism.
yeah. And so having Washington in there to grab a few more rebounds and block a shot, or I mean, Lubin tried to post up 2 or 3 times and turned it over every time. I mean, he missed a bunny late.
Yeah.
Maybe Washington doesn't turn it over and hits a shot, and he hits that bunny late just because he's got a little more length on him.
Yeah,
So
Lubin makes that layup. It rimmed out. I mean, that kind of changes the game because of the math there. So, Connor?
Yeah, absolutely.
My takeaway, Spencer, going back to what you said about the tight rotations, we're 22 games in now. I feel like you know what this team is. You know what you're going to get from your guys. K. Tyson's unplayable. Ty Claude can't catch the ball. Puts in a lot of effort, but he's not an offensive threat. You need that as a center. There's so many guys that you kind of know what you're going to get. So I don't blame Hubert for the tight rotations on a road game like this. And you look at the other side. I'm not
criticizing. I'm just saying that's the way it was.
Yeah, and they were tired. I'll give you that point. And you look at Pitt, very similar. 4 starters played 35 more minutes for Pitt. They really only went 6 deep if you really look at the box score. So, this is an important game for both teams. And you're right about Carolina getting tired at the end. They did miss Jaylen Washington. They did miss some bunnies. And the number one stat that stood out to me, Pitt finished 22-4 advantage in points off turnovers. They took advantage every time Carolina shot themselves in the foot. Number one stat jumped off the page to me.
UNC had how many turnovers here? 14 turnovers. Pitt had 6. That's the big stat. And then points off turnovers 22-4. Is that what you said?
Yeah, 22-4 points off turnovers for Pitt advantage.
And turnovers 14-6. That's the big number. And I think Jay Williams was great at the end there, talking about how UNC was down 4, I think, and they didn't huddle. There was 30-something seconds left. They were still in it. Missed shot, you're still in it, get the ball back. There was no huddling. There's no leadership. This is what he said. There's no huddling. There's no leadership. There's no communication. I would add, there was no fire. There was no one kind of getting them together. I think that's a big issue with this team. This version of the Tar Heels is not a huge leader. It's not a Harrison Ingram, a Cormac Ryan, or a Baycott. I don't think Baycott was a very big leader either, as a vocal leader. It's just RJ is not that guy. He's not a vocal guy. And that who else would it be? Seth Trimble has probably played the second most for UNC. So that comes when you have a lot of people exit the program and you bring in a whole new roster. And it's probably something we're going to experience next year as well. That's why it's important to bring in veterans who could play, like a Harrison Ingram or Cormac Ryan, who have experience leading. So it'll be very interesting to see. I mean, I think there's only so much you could talk about with this game. I thought one thing, your boy Zach Austin had 5 blocks, 2 of them in the last 4 minutes. He was unbelievable for Pitt defending him. He has some game-saving blocks there at the end. You can tell your story at the end, Connor. But let's look back at the roster. So at the schedule. So UNC's lost 3 of their last 4. Squeaked. I mean, it's awful too because they squeaked past Boston College and OT. Gave up 96 points to one of the worst teams in the Power 4, Power 5. Lost to Stanford, lost to Wake, win over Boston, Pitt, and then you have Duke on Saturday. Then Pitt, then a week off, then Pitt again, and then a quick turnaround to Monday at Clemson, and then next Saturday, the following Saturday at Syracuse. So that's the next 3 weeks. Duke, Pitt again, at Clemson, at Syracuse. They could lose all 4 of those games. They could go 2-2. It's probably the best. Will probably be 2-2, and could easily go 1-3.
If you look at it, and I know it's a rivalry game and anything can happen. It's really hard for me to see a world where this team competes against Duke on Saturday, at least. And things could change by the second matchup, but I don't know. I'm a little worried about Saturday. I think Cooper Flagg might have his way with this interior defense.
I think Con can have his way. They're bigger at every position on the floor. Maluk came in. Maluk is a 7-footer. Sian James. Sian James is a beast, and he's their point guard right now. I mean, he's 6'4", 210 probably. He looks huge. And Duke's coming off a little bit of a scare at Wake, and then a pretty decent scare last night at State. So they're going to be locked in this week of practice, get an extra day of practice, extra day to rest before the Tar Heels come to town on Saturday. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough stretch. And they could have stole one tonight at Pitt. That would have been huge. And I think Pitt's one of the teams UNC's competing with for a NCAA berth as well. Or they may not be. That could be a team they compete with for a tournament bid.
Speaking of the tournament, what do you, Spenser or Ross, either one of you guys, what does this team have to do to really, if they do make the tournament, to win a game, make it out of the first weekend? What needs to happen with this team?
Put the cart before the horse.
I'm actually okay.
What does this team need to do to win the NIT?
We got to get lucky enough to get in there. And I think it's just going to take some luck at this point. We're just going to have to pull a few games out, beat Duke at home, play decent in the ACC tournament, maybe beat Clemson. Like we're just going to have to eke out a few one or two quad one wins left, and hopefully not have any quad 3 or 4 losses. Which
1-7 in quad 1.
We will have some opportunities for a quad 3 or 4 loss, I believe, before the end of the season. So, actually, to just kind of talk about this team a little bit more generally, we've seen this team live and die, in my opinion, by their shooting percentage. Tonight, maybe a little bit of an outlier in that we shot 44% from the field, which is pretty good. But, think about the Wake Forest game. We shot a terrible percentage from the floor. But this team gets looks. We've talked a lot about the offense, the quality of the shots, the quality of the offense itself. Again, I'm just thinking about this Wake game. I'm thinking about the first half tonight. We had open shots, and we made those shots in the first half tonight. Against Wake Forest, we had a ton of open shots, especially in the second half. We bricked them all. In the second half tonight, like I said, we were 1 for 11 from 3 in the second half. That is awful. We were 9 for 29 from the field in the second half. That is 31%. That is awful. We shoot a little bit better percentage. This is maybe it's not a different outcome, but at least it's a little bit closer, and we don't have to foul and try to hit a Hail Mary at the end of the game. So, I think Hubert's offense, and I was actually listening to Justin Jackson and Theo Pinson and Ray Felton talking about the style of offense that this team runs, that we run an NBA style offense without a lot of NBA players. And, I do agree with that to the fullest extent. I mean, there's no pros on this team except for Ian Jackson and probably Drake Powell. They get looks, man. I mean, it may be ugly and it may be one-on-one at times, but we run plays that end up with looks, and if we don't hit them, it ends up in a loss. Almost definitely.
Yeah, I think we know what this team is now. We kind of know the rotation. Kay Tyson's not playing. Jaden Withers isn't playing very much. Leaning on Vanal Lubin and Jaylen Washington. Yeah, we know what they are. I mean, you say they're not making shots, but they don't make shots in the mini games. They missed good shots against Wake, and today I thought they jacked up a lot of poor shots that are a little bit deeper and maybe more contested, but it's kind of out of necessity at the end there. But some jacked up shots throughout the second half. I mean, you got to call it what it is. They're just not the best shooting team for a team that has no interior presence. You're gonna have to win from the outside. I just remember one possession where it was just so spread out. There's 5 out and just jacked up a 3 at bricks. I mean, this team's kind of what it is. And I think Adam Smith on the last podcast, which has been one of our most popular podcasts in terms of just reaction, he said this team's going to have to – Ian Jackson's going to have to score 20. And I kind of agree. I mean, he seems like the best pure scorer. And look, when he hasn't scored – close to 20 points. They've struggled, and when he did is when UNC went on a little run, and you kind of had a little hope. Because it seems like RJ Davis doesn't have it. You can't count on Elliot to really be your leading scorer, and it's certainly not going to be a post player. So without a really go-to three-point shooter, it's got to be Ian Jackson with RJ and Elliot kind of provided some complementary scoring.
And to rely on a true freshman as your number one go get a bucket option, I just feel like more often than not it doesn't work out. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but when he ripped off 6 20-point games out of 7, we went on here and I was like, I don't know if this is sustainable. And sure enough, he's had single digits 3 of the last 4 games. So if you're Carolina, the one thing I wanted to see is what are you going to do if Ian Jackson doesn't have it going? And so far, we haven't seen anything that makes me feel any more confident, honestly. And we've seen it from RJ Davis in spurts, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure the opposition is putting Ian Jackson a little bit higher in the scout, which has probably affected it. And look, he's a freshman. He's gonna have issues here and there. All right, anything else, guys? All right, we're going to end this portion here. I'm going to do one more ad read. We're going to bring on Isaac Trotter next. He's going to talk a little at UNC Pitt, preview UNC Duke, and just talk UNC in general. He is not a UNC fan, didn't go to UNC, went to Illinois, but he watches tons of ball. Stay tuned for that. I want to shout out Delta Spirits. I didn't talk about it, but this is like a liquid version of marijuana. So it gets you high. I don't know how it's legal, but it is. It's a local company out of Greensboro and Kernersville. This is like a cocktail version. We have the 6-packs. They're very tasty. Go onto their website. It is drinkdeltaspirits.com/shop. Obviously, you can find the shop place there and use the promo code BHO10. A lot of people moving away from alcohol. This is a great way to relax. Split a can with your significant other, have a couple laughs. It's a very tasty alcohol substitute or just a different way to consume your THC. Spenser, I got a question for Spenser. Do you wear polo shirts like nonstop? Like you treat it as a t-shirt? I have friends like that too.
No, actually, no. I play a lot of golf, so I always wear a golf shirt when I play golf, of course. But I'm actually more of a t-shirt or like a flannel guy, as a matter of fact. I've just found that the golf shirt is a comfortable way to hop on the pod and feel a little more dressed up.
You throw that on?
Okay. Oh yeah, I was wearing a raggedy t-shirt while I was watching the game, and then I just slipped into the Holderness and Bourne. Shout out Holderness and Bourne. I wish they'd sponsor the pod. Their founder is a Carolina alumni.
What is that?
They got the best collars in the game. Holderness and Bourne. Yeah.
Okay. We'll get the team on that. Get a little reach out email going.
They sponsored Joel Berry. I saw him do like an Instagram sponsored post. I'm like, let's get Holderness and Bourne sponsoring everything, man.
Never. It must be a pretty high level golf brand.
Yeah, it's like Peter Millar or any of those, but just a little bit more.
So probably pretty popular in the Chapel Hill area.
It's like the ones you can only buy at the clubhouses.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I know this.
This one doesn't have a logo, but I've got a couple other ones that have some logos.
Love it. All right, good stuff, guys. Appreciate your time, Connor, Spenser. Stay tuned for Isaac Trotter on the Big Hitters Only podcast. Delta Spirits, BHO10 to get 10% off your order. All right, now we bring on Isaac Trotter, national college basketball writer for 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports. I work with Trotter over at 24/7 Sports. What's up, man?
What's up? How we doing?
Good. It is Wednesday morning, January 29th. This is the Big Hitters Only podcast, 9:02 a.m. We watched the UNC Pitt game last night. We talked to Spenser and Connor about that. We're going to recap that a little bit, but Trotter watches probably most basketball, anybody I know, most college basketball. He loves the game, so I wanted to get his thoughts on UNC in general, and then a little bit of a UNC Duke preview. So, Isaac, what is wrong with UNC? What are the core issues? I've talked about it endlessly on this podcast, but I want to get your opinion on what's going wrong right now.
One thing I noticed yesterday with Pitt, I felt like Pitt was really able to create really good shots last night, especially in that second half. They're just able to crease the defense, and you're constantly seeing them, make that extra pass, and they're getting really good looks. Conversely, Carolina goes down, and it feels like I'm constantly watching them going, one more, one more, one more. It's like they just refuse to make that extra pass to get that extra good shot in big time situations. And I think that's some of those things offensively that we're starting to see some of these late game offenses continue to bog down because the dribbles are more than the passes right now. Mm-hmm. And the flow offensively, I feel like, has been a little bit frustrating because you kind of expected this group to be a little bit ahead of schedule. You're playing multiple point guards at a time. It feels like this team should be able to get into the paint whenever it wants. It should be able to create really good looks offensively. And very often it feels like it resorts to ISO ball. And I think that has kind of lowered the margins. We already knew some of the issues with the roster construction, right? Like it's hard when you don't have somebody who can really post up. It's hard when you don't have somebody who's setting great screens. I think Armando Bacot's screening is missed as much as almost anybody for this group. But offensively, when it gets down to a lot of ISO ball and you're seeing RJ kind of get bogged down and then Ian's getting bogged down and Elliot's making pretty rough turnovers. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating because I feel like there's a ceiling for this offense that they're not close to getting to, and some changes need to be made.
Yeah, so what is wrong with the offense? I mean, why are they not running action? It just seems like it's a lot of 5 out, high ball screen, and I don't know, they're not running RJ off a bunch of screens. It's been a frustrating thing the whole season of just the lack of running any sort of semblance of offense or plays. Why is it? Why can't they run just simple stuff to get good looks consistently?
Yeah, I'm not sure if these pieces coalesce as well as we necessarily thought. I think that, RJ, the off movement shooting was supposed to be a big part of his appeal this year, and the jumper just hasn't gone in. And I don't think that's because he's a bad shooter. It's just, it feels like he's not necessarily getting his spots yesterday. There were multiple possessions late in that game where RJ's wide open after a scramble drill. And again, I'm saying, I'm asking for one more pass just because he's having good looks. I think the quality of shot he's taking this year is a little bit different. The cutting hasn't been outstanding. I think you're seeing a lot of standing around. I think 5 out offense, I think 5 out offense sounds fun to say, but 4 out 1 in is probably the hardest to guard because there opens up an extra gap, an extra driving lane. And so we've seen some times, I think, with North Carolina where offensively it can get a little bit stagnant because the cutting's not there and it constantly feels like you're right. It's middle ball screen and teams are loaded up against it. They're kind of playing off Seth a little bit, knowing that we have to create against the drive. We're loading up against Cadeau because we have to play against the drive. And it's all right, how many true guys do we have to be dialed in on the scouting report from a shooting perspective? More often than not, it's just 2. And that makes it a lot easier for opposing defenses to really load up and make some of these driving lanes disappear. And, honestly, when your offense is struggling, basketball's an easy sport sometimes. It correlates with some of the defensive issues, I think, that are coming into play.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a lot, and it's endlessly just the roster construction. The guards are too small. They're missing a big man, Armando Bacot. They're missing a Harrison Ingram. They're just lacking that rebounding force, that screening force, which I think is overlooked. And obviously, they're not running much offense through the post. And then I think they expected Cade Tyson to be the second leading scorer and a guy who could just knock down shots. So they expected to have that extra shooter, and he's non-existent. He's non-playable, as Adam Smith said on an earlier podcast. It was just a complete miss in the portal. I mean, I don't know how much you scouted Cade. Why is it not working for Cade? Did you see anything at Belmont that would alert you to that? Is he just not athletic enough to play at this level? You would think the shooting would translate, but it just hasn't.
I thought the shooting would translate too, so I'm not going to come in and be like, I was the smartest guy in the room. I 100% knew that this was not going to go well because he was a top 30 transfer for us, right? And, I didn't fight back on that at all. I thought it made sense for his destination to go there to play with multiple guards that could get out in transition and get him some good looks. One thing I think if hindsight is 2020, not all threes are created equally. The catch and shoot threes that he was getting a lot of at Belmont, Jacoby Gillespie, who's transferred from Belmont to Maryland, has turned out to be a pretty darn good point guard. And he created a ton of great looks for him. And I think we're starting to see a pattern where guys that can't make off the dribble threes are having a hard time translating up to the high major ranks. And that was not a big part of Cade Tyson's game. He wasn't able to create that self-created offense off the bounce. And those type of shooters where it's all right, they're kind of limited to just, catch and shoots. can make it, where the floor is pretty low. Like there's times where the ceiling can really come into play and everything kind of coalesces, but the floor is low when your entire value to the floor is based on how many catch and shoot threes you're making. And they haven't been able to get him going off post-ups. That was a part of his game that was pretty decent at Belmont last year. Defensively, I think he's really struggled. And, one of my really good friends who's in the coaching industry, he was saying, like, when you're not making shots, your athleticism really, like, gets even worse. And when you're making shots, like, you feel more athletic. You're feeling bouncy. You're getting up and down the floor. And I think that's a situation where he's not a plus athlete already. And then when you miss shots, it's like, all right, all of the athleticism, warts of his game have really come into play even worse.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend too much time on him because he is just not even a part of the team anymore. It's almost just like a walk-on you don't even consider. I just think it's hard for him to get in a rhythm or get comfortable because they're not playing him enough. And then I don't think they ran any plays for him. Just like they're not running much for RJ off screens, like double screens, baseline, like run him around, get him open like they did at Belmont. It just doesn't seem like they gave him a chance, and now it's too late. All right, let's take a step back, kind of move away from Pitt. What do you think's like the core issue with UNC as a whole? Not in game, but like why have they struggled under Hubert? It seems like it's going to be the 2 out of the 4 years they're not going to make the tournament. What are the issues? Is it just misses in the portal? Is it roster construction? Is it a lack of NIL and recruiting? What do you see from the national perspective?
Yeah, I think it's Carolina, right? Like you can get pretty much who you want. I mean, we like the talent that they added in the portal on paper for the most part, right? Like if other than the bigs, right? Like the situation with the bigs was there. But, I think the player development also is a piece that has been a little bit underlooked. Like Cadeau hasn't made major strides yet. In year 2, he still has an offensive rating that's very mediocre compared to national standards, right? Even Jaylen Washington, I'm talking to multiple coaching staffs on rival teams heading into this year, and they're like, I like Jaylen Washington. Like, I think it makes sense for them to ride with him. This could be a chance for him to really cement himself as a no doubt like high major starter. And, there have been little strides throughout the season, but now the knee injuries popped up. Like, it hasn't really clicked for him. So I think it's all correlated and tied together because, last year at this time, like we were praising Hubert Davis's decisions to go into the portal and scout and find, the Cormax Ryans, find the Harrison Ingram, like they found the right pieces. So I don't think it's necessarily like they can't recruit the portal or anything, but I just feel like that internal development, like they brought Cadeau here to be a star and he hasn't necessarily developed into that. Jaylen Washington, like this was a big bet on him this year to potentially turn into something and he hasn't really necessarily turned into that. And, I'm fascinated to see how they learn and how they grow from this because like this season isn't necessarily lost, so to speak. Like you still have a lot of season left. You could still get this on track. And we've seen at peaks where Carolina has like moments where they give teams trouble, but how can we move forward with this in the roster construction in this portal cycle? And like, who are we able to keep? Can we get, is it feasible to get Drake Powell back? Is it feasible to like have a hard conversations about like what we want from our point guards and what we want from our centers? Because right now their options haven't been good enough.
Yeah. I mean, I look at the schedule, Isaac, you got Duke and then Pitt again. It's Pitt twice in 3 games. At Clemson, at Syracuse. I mean, it could get ugly real quick. I mean, that could be 3. They could lose 3 of the next 4. They could lose the rest of the 4. I mean, that would put them out of the tournament. I think it's pretty bleak right now. They've lost 3 of the last 4. But, yeah, it's interesting. Development. I haven't heard too much talk about that. Is that a coaching staff thing? I think if Hubert does come back, I think he would be forced or need to make some changes. Something needs to change on the staff. It's all Carolina guys. It's all his buddies from when he played or someone that has a connection to the program. I just think there needs to be some sort of new voices because it's just too comfortable. Like you said, not too much development with returning players. I think it's going to be a huge, just like this year, a huge roster change next year. You could see Elliot transfer. I doubt, Ian's probably gone. So these players might just want a different environment. So you could see, who knows, Washington or Val Lubin, who knows who's coming back. Yeah, they'd be lucky to get Drake Powell back, Seth Trimble back. I don't see a scenario where Cade comes back because he's making $600K. So yeah. Anyway, I mean, do you think he's a good recruiter, Hubert? I had this conversation. I think he's had so many misses. They missed on 5 guys, 5 big men in the portal this year in the 2025 class. They hit on Caleb Wilson, but they missed on so many of the top 25 guys they went after. I just don't think he's as good as a recruiter as people maybe think he is. He landed Ian Jackson. He has had some success in the portal, but overall, I don't think it's up to standard of what UNC's used to.
No, I think that's totally fair. An underrated one too is Aduthiero. How good would he have been for this team? Like, he would have been a perfect fit for, that junkyard dog, like a little bit of an ass kicker that, like, sometimes I feel like Carolina could really use, especially on the glass, that offensive rebounding pop, the transition, extra dominance, like that big physical wing that can just, like, blow the doors off of you just physically. So, yeah, that's another interesting miss. Like, it's fascinating. It's like, it feels like it's Carolina. You should be able to get who you want. And that hasn't happened. And, I'm curious to I'm curious to see how this impacts it in the rev share era as well, where the numbers start to get a little bit more similar for a lot of these teams. There's going to be teams with serious money all over college basketball. It means that everything else has to be awesome as well. Like, this whole, like, we'll just outbid you for guys like that. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case in the revenue sharing era that's right around the corner.
Yeah, I wonder if that in a couple years helps UNC, because as UNC gets their NIL figured out and has the revenue sharing, then they're on an equal footing with some of these SEC schools. And then the Carolina factor, the Michael Jordan factor, does play more of a role once, because it seems like they offered Dabansa enough money. They had competitive offers for some of the transfers that they missed out on. Then it comes to, can you recruit? Do you have a coach who's charismatic enough, a developmental program? You see Duke has 20, 30 pros, and UNC has like 6, I think, in the NBA right now, if that. You mentioned Adothiero at Arkansas, right? And then Cliff Amori, I mean, he was plus 25 when UNC played Alabama. Jaron Stevenson they missed out on, is at Alabama, so they've missed on some key players, which they could definitely use this season. Okay. Let's talk Duke. I mean, anything else at UNC you want to talk about? Anything else national about UNC that concerns you, that you like, that you don't like? It's pretty bleak over here in Tar Heel world.
Well, to be honest, I think Hubert's decision, whether he comes back or, if he decides like, hey, like, I'm not the guy for the job, like, I'm going to step away, would have a huge
Are you hearing
impact.
That at all?
I haven't heard that for sure yet, but I think I'm just kind of reading the tea leaves of like, that wouldn't surprise me at this point.
I've heard that 3 times now.
Yeah, I think that there could be a situation where it's like, I just don't feel like I'm cut out for this, and someone else could do this better. And I want to see the best for Carolina basketball. And if that happens this offseason, the last year's carousel was crazy. Like, there's some real conversations kind of behind the scenes of like, man, this coaching class, like, there's not a lot of big names right now. Like, you're not hearing that hot mid-major name that, like, everybody's, like, can't wait to have. So I'm just fascinated to see if that decision actually goes down. What does Carolina would vault to the top of the pecking order? Like, what does that have? Like, there'd be a huge ripple effect on the carousel. But, again, there's a lot of time left for that to happen. And I think we have to let the season play out a little bit more.
Yeah, on that note, I think Hubert sees being a coach, he said it, as like mission work, like molding young men, as giving back, as his purpose to enrich the lives of young people. And that's not what college basketball is anymore. That's a Dean Smith thing. That's a thing where money and NBA and you had a player stay for 4 years. That's just not what it is anymore. So I think he 4 or 5 years ago when he took the job, it was more like that. But now it's all agents. He's talked about not enjoying the agent process, and he talks to agents more than he talks to players and coaches and parents players. So what he thought he was getting into, it's not turned out to be. So I've heard that there's this is a rumor, but just a chance that this is not for him. He steps down anyway. All right, Duke UNC. I watched Duke. It's probably I watch every Carolina game, but I watch a lot of Duke too. It's probably the only team I watch consistently. How good is this Duke team? Like, is it up there with the best Duke teams ever? How does it compare to some of the ones you've seen recently? Like, what are we talking about here?
This team is one of the better teams in the country this year, just because they're so elite on both ends. I'm not great with the historical stuff of because it just feels so different with how the league has changed. But I just think for this year only, their strengths are elite. I think the worst part of Duke that we've seen is they get bored sometimes. That's the one downside with them, where it feels like they just get a little bit bored. But for the most part, defensively, they've been outstanding. When Common Malawach and Cooper Flagg are on the floor together, teams are shooting 48% at the rim. And offensively, Duke is shooting 70% at the rim. So that rim dominance on both ends of the floor just makes your life so much easier for everything they're going to do. And I kind of could describe Duke as a little bit of that Cobra mixed with they just squeeze you to death really slowly. They're not playing up tempo. They squeeze the life out of these teams in low possession games because they take better shots than you at the rim and you don't get shots at the rim. So that looking at this Carolina matchup, Carolina doesn't really get a lot at the rim in the half court situations already. It feels like they're kind of played right into their hands, where Duke wants to force a lot of those off the dribble jumpers. Carolina has multiple guards who are more than willing to take those type of shots. So you're kind of playing into it. So this game is going to be, pretty interesting, because I think Carolina's strengths kind of go with what Duke wants to give up defensively and offense. And then you're going to have to need a big Ian Jackson game. You're going to have to need a big RJ Davis game. And I don't think Carolina can win this game unless they eclipse 20 points in transition. Because you look on Synergy and it'll be Duke's transition defense is awesome. But you go to the game by game thing, Wake Forest torched them for 19 in transition. They were running. You have to beat these Duke's bigs down the floor. Malawach is too good of a rim protector. And if Carolina's running and getting out in transition and playing 3-on-3 basketball or 3-on-2 basketball, that's their path to making this one really, really competitive.
Yeah, just a glimmer of hope there. I think you're right. Easy basket, score in transition. You gotta have to hit a lot of threes too, because you're not getting much otherwise. I think the size differential at play. I mean, it's an awful matchup for UNC. I mean, UNC's me 3 or 4 inches shorter at every position. Duke has huge guards, especially with Sion James now. That guy's a beast. And then Con Knipple and Cooper Flagg are 6'5", 6'6", and then 6'8", 6'9", and then how do you say Maluk?
Kaman Malawach, I think. You listen to different announcers; they all say it differently, but that's what I'm rocking with.
Yeah, and they have no one who can match up with him. So size-wise, it's a horrible matchup for UNC. So yeah, transition, easy baskets. Back to Duke, Cooper Flagg. What is he doing? What makes him so special? I mean, he's going to be ACC Player of the Year, ACC Rookie of the Year, and probably National Player of the Year, depending on what happens with Johnny Broome. What makes him so good? What's he so special about? How do you see him translation in the NBA? Let's talk Cooper Flagg. I think he's so interesting. And one thing, I think he's not as hated. He's not really hated much. I think he's so good. It's kind of like Zion. Zion wasn't hated as much as a Duke guy because he was so good.
No, that's a great point. Yeah, I feel like Cooper has really elevated his game lately with the on-the-move shooting. It's something I've really been talking about lately. His form looks phenomenal, but early in the season it wasn't going in. Shots just weren't going in, but his form is really clean. And lately, it's just kind of been like the cheat code, where it just adds a different layer to his offensive game that's really elevated him. And he'll come off pin downs and be ready to go. And Carolina is going to have to be really smart with their off-ball switching. They have to understand the scouting report big time. They cannot lose him. They can't get overly out-leveraged in a football term, so to speak, and kind of give up open looks from him from that regard. But he's an outstanding cutter. He's terrific in transition. He's driving to the basket, trying to tear the rim off. I think there's been some times where his spin move can be a little bit game planned against. So if you're Carolina, it's hey, let's get in that gap when he's driving left and he's going to spin back right. Let's be in the spot. You could potentially take a charge. You could try to rip him. That's been an area that we've seen teams try to go at Flagg a little bit. But for the most part, he's been even better than advertised. You look at Ken Palm's Player of the Year rating since 2011, Cooper Flagg's having the second best individual season ever. This is the type of dominance on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively, that I think a lot of people thought he might have, but he's been even better offensively than I've expected, and it's because that on the move shooting, he is legitimately scoring at all three levels and can score with either hand. And this is a game where Drake Powell, you want to make some money, this is a time for you, Drake Powell, to show why you might be one of the elite defensive prospects in the 2025 NBA draft.
Yeah, I was thinking about that this morning. I think they put Drake Powell on him. I think they start Drake Powell. I think Drake hasn't started the last 2 games as they've gone with Trimble in the lineup along with Ian Jackson. So that'd be a cool matchup, freshman on freshman. He gives UNC the best chance with his length and athleticism. So that'd be cool to see. It's funny, yeah. The one weakness is Cooper Flagg is when he tries to do a spin move in the paint. That's how he's had turnovers in key games early in the season. I saw it again against Wake Forest. When he tries to do a little too much in the paint, that spin move, it can often is a turnover. What else do you like about Duke? What else makes him so good beyond the size, the at the rim stuff? Any player that stands out to you that you really like?
Duke has done a really good job of creating unguarded catch and shoot threes, which, the median average on that this year is about 37%. Like I said, not all threes are created equally, right? Unguarded catch and shoot threes, 37%. I think off the dribble threes are like 29%, and guarded catch and shoots are like 30%. So they're creating the best three-point shot at a high rate. Like no high major team is creating more unguarded catch and shoot threes than Duke, and it's because of like their floor spacing and their unselfishness. And Zion James, like we talked about earlier, what a complete freak show. Like he is outstanding defensively, but his trigger work, I call him like Duke's version of Drew Holiday. Like he sits in the dunker spot and he'll like find open threes. You can use him as a pick and roll guy. You can use him as a screener. He just gets into the short roll 4-on-3s, finds open shooters. Like he's a really good connector, and Con Knippel's been a big part of that as well, shooting it better. Tyrese Proctor, a little bit up and down lately, but overall this year he's been a much improved shooter. It's weird, I kind of was expecting, Caleb Foster to be a big part of this team, and he just hasn't. He's been buried on the bench. I think Isaiah Evans has even passed him up in the depth chart. At times it feels like Duke is better with Mason Gillis on the floor at times this year. So if I'm Carolina and I'm game planning this game, like whenever Caleb Foster's on the floor, like I'm going at that dude, because I think Carolina's speed is going to give him some trouble. Foster, that's one area of his game. He's not the fastest laterally. And, Duke's size on the perimeter is certainly something. And they've been good defensively this year, but I wonder how much Carolina's speed will give them issues. Because, like, you're asking, like, a Con Knippel who defensively has been good this year, but he's 6'6". Like, can you really hang with some of these fast guards? Like Duke switches a lot on this perimeter. Like Cadeau is going to really, like that first step from him is going to be nuts. Trimble's first step is really good. Jackson, like his burst is real. We know RJ's burst is real. So, I think Duke's size is great and their length is great, but I'm curious to see how they handle like this speed and quick twitch first step of Carolina's guards, and if they can actually stay in front. If they can't, and they're constantly getting in rotation, Carolina's going to have some open looks to be had. We'll just see if they can make shots, because at times this year it feels like making shots has been a chore.
Yeah, some glimmers of hope there. The speed of UNC, the transition scoring, you've got to hit from three. You've got to get Ian Jackson, RJ, even Seth and Elliot Cadeau going from three. What do you think the spread's going to be when it comes out on Saturday or Friday?
Boy, I think what did the KenPom line have it? I think Duke is favored by 16. That seems a little steep for me. I bet it closes around 11.5, 12.
Okay. That was the line. I think Duke was 12-2 or 11.5. I think at Cameron it's going to be a little bit higher, but I don't know. It could get ugly, but yeah, I think you've given UNC fans a little bit of ways they can at least stay close here. All right, Isaac, appreciate your time. Guys, remember, we got a sponsor here, Isaac. Delta Spirits, a local THC drink company on board. Use the code BHO10 to get 10% off your order. Go to drinkdeltaspirits.com for your order. Isaac, we appreciate your time, man.
Thanks for having me.